and the combination of individuals you use in a meeting is very much the product of a case-by-case analysis. It is, as we mentioned earlier in this training, a judgment call. It is critical to keep in mind that legislators are not listening to just our voice and our issues. Instead, during the legislative session, there are hundreds of extremely complex and controversial issues competing for the scarce time and attention of legislators and staff. Our job, therefore, is to get their attention and make their jobs easier. We make their jobs easier by drafting bills, legislative memos, and providing succinct background information, and by making our message as strong as possible. Exactly how and when we do this is often a judgment call, but there are certain factors that can strengthen our message, which include increasing the number of people and organizations who are expressing the same issue. Hearing that development is important from 10 people is one thing. Hearing that it is important from 10,000 is another. The more politicians hear an advocacy message, the more likely they are to support it. And the facts must stand up to scrutiny. Make sure your facts are correct and can be substantiated. Advocates should also understand that legislative staff are important players. Don't be offended if, when visiting your legislator, you see his or her staff instead of the elected official. When that happens, remind yourself of the following. Legislative staff do most of the substantive work for legislators. Legislative staff make key recommendations. Legislative staff will lobby their own boss for or against your position, whether or not you have the opportunity to ever meet the legislator. And when it comes to our issues, legislative staff members are often as influential as the legislators they work for. So remember, if you have the chance to build a relationship with key legislative staff, by all means do it. We often hear Albany's legislative process characterized by the colorful statement, 3 men in a room. This statement refers to the enormous amount of power held by the Capitol's 3 most powerful leaders, the Senate Majority Leader, Assembly Speaker, and the Governor. As disheartening as the idea of 3 men in a room manipulating the entire state might be, it is often reality, and influencing your legislator may account to very little if your legislator does not, in turn, advocate with their leaders. The good news is that legislative leaders want to know where your legislator and other rank-and-file legislators stand on an issue. It's not surprising, therefore, that top staff often ask us, do you have a reasonable number of members who support what you're trying to do? This requires you to advocate forcefully enough to motivate your legislator to lobby behind the scenes where most of the decisions are made. Generally, people outside of the legislature are not familiar with the behind-the-scenes process. Among other tactics, however, it is practical to ask your legislator to write a letter to their leaders asking them to support your issue. Legislative leaders keep careful track of these letters. It is important to ask your legislator for a copy of their letter. That way, you will know what your legislator is saying, and your legislator knows that you are watching carefully. NYSARC will advise when to use these tactics, and to expedite matters will often provide a draft letter for your legislator to sign to send to leadership. It is worth noting that particularly for NYSARC, the organization's history is very important. We need to know where people who have developmental disabilities have come from and where they are going. This is the basis to almost everything we and other advocates argue for in the legislature. Remember, the past consists of devaluation and institutional warehousing of people who have intellectual and other developmental disabilities. The present and future consists of more community-based options, stronger and more determined self-advocates, and better informed families who are actively advocating for rights and needs of their loved ones. Everything we do can be tied to this historic continuum, not that it is always necessary, but the fact that we are rooted in the history of a major public policy shift extending decades gives our arguments greater weight when we can tie them to that history. Welcome to Part 4 of NYSARC's presentation on legislative advocacy. This final portion of the presentation includes concrete tips and online resources that provide useful information for legislative advocacy. We suggest that you print the following slides for future reference. First, do's and don'ts when meeting with your legislator. Most of these are obvious, common sense tips. You could probably write this yourself, but this is important information and worth reviewing. Just to mention a few. If you intend to visit your legislator, do make an appointment to speak with him or her. On the other hand, don't arrive unexpectedly and expect to see your legislator personally. Do be on time for visits. Legislators are busy and you will miss your opportunity if you are not on time for your appointment. Do state the reason for your visit and summarize the issue you are there to talk about. Be succinct and compelling. Do use your own personal stories to help make your point. This is extremely important and puts real people and real needs in front of the legislator. Do provide reliable facts to support your position. You must have the necessary facts for your legislator to be considered a credible source of information. Don't be confrontational. You want your legislator to work with you on an issue. You don't want to create an adversarial relationship. Do provide names of people and resources that your legislator can use. Don't try to answer questions that you aren't sure of. Be upfront and tell your legislator that you will provide the information as soon as possible. Do leave concise written material summarizing your issue. This information will be valuable when your legislator or his or her staff is reviewing your issue or request. If possible, do use your visit as a photo opportunity with your legislator. As noted earlier, legislators want to be visible, especially with NYSARC chapters. Publish these photos in places such as your chapter's Facebook page, website, and newsletter. Ask your chapter's public relations director for assistance. Do write a thank you note immediately following your meeting. This is extremely important as it gives you the opportunity to summarize your meeting and the issues discussed. And do regard any visit or contact as part of a continuing relationship with your legislator. Effective relationships with legislators are not one-time events. Like any relationship, it must be nurtured and ongoing. Do, as part of establishing an ongoing relationship, arrange for your legislator or their staff to visit your chapter to personally meet with some of the individuals and families you support. This puts a real face on the issue and provides the individuals and family members the opportunity to share not only what their concerns are, but the many successes they have experienced because of the supports they receive. Do follow your meeting up with written material supporting your position. Restate the issue discussed. If you are advocating for or against legislation, be sure to cite the bill number. Do ask for your legislator to advocate for your position, especially with their colleagues and their leadership. As noted previously, ask your legislator to write a letter to the leadership with a copy to you. Do make sure that all communications are succinct and to the point. Finally, the Internet provides a wealth of valuable information on issues and bills as well as on your elected officials, both federal and state. This slide includes Internet addresses for key New York State websites, including the State Senate and Assembly, the Governor's Office, the Division of the Budget, the New York State Office of Mental Retardation and Developmental Disabilities, the Commission on Quality of Care, and advocacy organizations for people who have disabilities. Among much else, there is contact information for state senators on the State Senate website, Assembly members on the Assembly website, and the Governor on his website. You can also email all legislators and the Governor through their individual sites. There is much more information on these sites, which is very useful. For example, both the State, Senate, and Assembly websites have features allowing you to track bills in their state legislature. It is worth taking time to explore these and other features when you have the chance. This slide includes key federal websites. Through these sites, you can contact your U.S. Senator, members of Congress, and even the President by phone, mail, or email. The congressional tracking site called Thomas gives you the ability to track bills in Congress, find out who is sponsoring key legislation, and provides access to the full text of bills being debated in Washington. Also listed are websites of several advocacy organizations, including the ARC of the United States. These sites provide a wealth of information on issues and events in the field. As noted, this presentation covers general information. Clearly, working with the legislature offers extraordinarily complex challenges which go far beyond what has been discussed here. No matter how much time we spend on this topic, there are no clear or easy answers for much of what advocates deal with in the legislature. We must, as stated earlier, primarily rely on educated judgment calls. This concludes our presentation on legislative advocacy. Thank you and good luck advocating.